The dotnet identity library is a pretty awesome library. It handles a lot of good stuff as far as security for you, but it can be pretty difficult if you don't really know what's going on. So today we're going to go from combine both a database first and a code first framework. So I've scaffolded my movies database to get my controllers and context for that database. But because the users in that table are not the same, don't have the same setup that the authentication that identity needs, we're not able to use the same user without extending the user. The .NET Identity Library, it creates all of these tables for you, and if you use migrations, it will create those, it will create all these tables plus the other models that you have and connect it to the same database. However, because I was given a database, this movies database to use, I couldn't scaffold my database in, create all my models, and then go back and add in the authentication database. So, and you could, if I didn't already have this users table with 200 users already, I could have just erased that, uh, does not use that users table and use the default user table and extended it. Really, that just means that we add in the columns that we need to this identity user. But I'll explain more of that later. So, but to briefly go over what identity does, it gives you these tables and then it'll handle authentication by taking your users along and then salting and hashing their passwords for you, along with being able to assign them roles and handling those roles when a user tries to log in, and allows you to include cookies to use those roles on the front end. Not quite on the front end, but to allow you to call certain APIs based off of roles, role-based authentication, if you will. If you want to change the front end based off of the authorization, you have to use JWT tokens, but that's out of the scope of this project. The the first thing we're gonna go over is this program, our program.cs. What this file does is essentially tells the computer how to compile the app when we're trying to load. So the first thing we're going to do is add, you know what, let's add our DB context first. So this model creates this entire database, and in it will have all of these tables. Something to keep in mind, well, so we create our context and then we inherit from the identity DB context library. Make sure that you import these two packages. And then we have our app identity user and our identity role. The default for these both are strings, but because I was already given my users and the user ID primary key was an integer, I have to explicitly tell it I'm going to be using integers for this. The other thing we need to change is because by default these are all strings, I had to explicitly tell it to use integers for all of these because the role and ID are going to be integers for everything. This app identity doesn't have it because I already created a custom app identity user, and I'll explain that in a second. And these are the default names for the tables. Otherwise, it would have created these tables for, like I could have called this database roles or security roles or something, and it would have created that instead of this. But these are the default names, and I'm just leaving it like that. And I'm going to push all, these are already in the GitHub. I'll put in the link of the video so you can go ahead and just copy this directly. This app identity user creates our users for the authentication. It's essentially going to replace our movies database because we're going to copy all this over into here. And because this database has all these extra columns that this doesn't, this by default, it has this like things about sign in and security. I think it does include your email and whether the email is confirmed, this lockout stuff, but not all of the other stuff that oh, and your password. But it doesn't include the information about the users that I need for my actual, to use my movies database. You could try to uh, do a foreign key relationship so it creates the user with all the security information and have a foreign key go here. But I tried that, had some issues, and I decided to just keep it simple and do one table with everything. So yeah, what extending means, oh, here we also inherit the identity user. This would be the default, just like identity role is the default here. But here is where I explicitly call identity user, inherit all of those security tables, and then add these ones, or security columns, and then add these ones. That's what extending means. Also, we have to inherit from the identity library again. So now that we've explained the DB context, creating the context file that works between our database and our model, we go to our program CS and we add our DB context here. So just add the DB context and the connection string. This is a connection string that you put in the app settings.json, and short and sweet. I created a database folder and put all my databases in there, so I have to include that route here so that it knows where to access them. And then these are just other databases. There's a lot of changes we got to make to the program CS because again, this is where it comes from. This is where it gets built. So we have to add our authorization. I had to add these policies in order for the controllers to know if I'm going to allow an admin, just an admin, or if I'm going to allow both a admin and a user. This is how we lock down our APIs. So after adding that authorization above, go in and add identity. We're going to use our custom identity with the extended columns, and then the default role with integers. Your passwords, password requirements for creating new passwords, because again, that's handled by the .NET library. Just other settings. This is important. This is going to use the DB context, and then just include that line. And then every time you log in, you need to make a claim. So we add identity options. This handles that. And then this is also important to use we have a custom user claims principal factory. And that's also going to use our user. And this is inheriting from another model that I have in services. and that was created by Professor Wells. And then cookie configurations, add cores. When you go to deploy, you're going to need this. So make sure you allow origins from your front end URL and your local host so you can test on both. Oh, and it's very important you also have this email sender. And here's a non-operational email sender. .NET library just includes this for backup verification if someone forgets their email or whatever. You're going to want to put your user in here. And this is another custom class from Dr. Wells that is in here. So that's all builder.services, and then we actually build the app, and we're using Swagger to test deployment on the back end, and then our cores policy include that, HTTPS redirection, and then you'll want to add these lines to use authentication, authorization, maplet controllers, and the identity. And then in order to log out, it's not included in the default. So log out and this ping auth. And my ping auth is a little bit different than Professor Wells because I include this roles in the return JSON, and that was very helpful in figuring out whether or not the database was actually recognizing the roles that I thought I was creating, and that identity could see them because I was having some problems accessing the API after I locked it down. The last, close to the last thing is this roles controller, and this will give us these access to add role, assign role, and set or reset password. This wasn't included with Professor Wells's, but it's very helpful because we were given users, but they didn't have passwords. And so we couldn't log in as an authenticated user to see their movie recommendations. So I went in and, chat generated that API for me, and I was able to go in. I had to manually add a username, and it's very important too. The way it actually goes in is it checks this normalized email. So I had to copy this email, and then for me, it made it all caps. Sometimes it makes it all lowercase. So you might need to try both. Also, none of these rows can be blank. So they all can kind of be, or can be null values. And when you go in and create it, it will be null. So I had to go in and just put 0 on everything besides this lockout end that had to be a date time. And then I was able to use that API. Okay, so from there, we should be set up to run our migration. So now that the database is all ready, or all the context and everything, go ahead and run this. You'll have to specify what DB context you're using since I have 2. And then I can go check my migrations. And this will show me exactly what it's trying to do. Now I should show you this one because this is where it actually created the tables. So it created the ASP.NET role, create movie user, ASP.NET role claims, and actually yours wouldn't have this movie user because I originally had it when I tried to do that. The foreign key, it added the movie user table here, but we're not doing that. All right. So from there, then you can update, run .NET .NET EF database update, and that will actually create the database. It won't show up here, but it will show up down here. And then you can, here, we'll move this real quick, not drop. You can go here, connect to database, add data source manually, SQLite, then you go to the path of your database. Test the connection string to know if it works, and then you can access it here within Writer, which is helpful. And you'll see, hopefully your users table will have all of these columns, including the extended columns. Then we can go over to DB Browser, create table, file, import table from CSV, and we're gonna erase this the one that's included, the users, the ASP.NET users. We're gonna put in this movie user CSV that I already went in and added in all the columns that were added by .NET. And now I have this movie users table. Now before running any other migrations, delete this users table and use the new movies table. I've already done that and I'm not messing with my data, so I'm just going to delete it. But you would rename it to ASP.NET users, and then you're essentially just tricking .NET into thinking that the one with the data is the one that you've been wanting, or the one that it created. Now, the last thing we need to do before we can build and deploy is edit this csproj file. .NET or Writer doesn't show you that, but in VS Code you can. And all you need to do is add this databases, or the path to your databases, and this preserve newest. That way, when it builds, it'll use the newest version of your database. Now I'll go back and to test if it all is working, run .NET build. If you have errors, they'll show up here. The yellow warnings, it'll still build without them. So I just leave it. Oh, it's very important that you delete your old publish file before you create a new one. Otherwise, it'll put publish inside of a publish, and that doesn't work. And it can't deploy from that. So we'll run .NET publish -o, lowercase o, somewhere I have it in here. Something like this. Ask chat to generate it for you. It's publish -o something with R -c, then publish, /publish, and that'll put a publish folder in here. And then you're ready to go over to Azure and create a new app service web app. Call it whatever you want, testing. We're running .NET 8, free version. It'll create it and give you an option to deploy. The problem I was running into is you have to make sure on this within VS Code, this app settings.json, it was trying to publish my entire backend, but it expects a deployable version, and that's what publish is. So go ahead and deploy. When it creates, it doesn't take too long. It'll give you this option to deploy, and when I would deploy, it was deploying my entire backend until I changed that. So you just have to go in and make sure that these files, that whatever's in there, I'll go here since it's working. The files are the same files that are in your publish folder and nothing else. If you after you've published, you could run .NET watch run to connect to Swagger and try adding roles, and you should see all of these APIs that were included from the identity library. And if it still doesn't work on Azure, or you think it's working, if you think it's working, you can go right click on it, browse website, and then this is one I already have up, but just put in one of the APIs that are open, not locked down, and you should be getting data. Then you know that the backend's working. And if it's not, you can always go to the logs. They're sometimes hard to read, but chat can read them. I found this event log was the most helpful. Most recent stuff is down at the bottom, and it can give you errors or whatever might be going on. Hopefully that was helpful, but that's one way you can go. You can include, you can mix code first and database first for scaffolding and migrations, and include the .NET Identity Library.